let me start. Okay, that was loud. So we're going to start talking about the tools that we actually need for seed starting. Many of you are probably starting to think about seed starting, or you already are. And we may not have a lot of people join today, but this is a recorded event. So I always love to share the replay because everybody has different schedules. So, and this is a good time that works for me. And I want to make sure that we can share all this information with everyone so they feel motivated and excited. Caroline, it's good to see you here. No need to turn on your video. I know it's that time of day where we might just be sitting at our desks and things like that. So I feel you're waving. Thank you for keeping me company. So anyways, we're going to be talking about the tools and I want to go through them. Caroline, you are in the community, so you actually have access to the course already, but there is a seed starting 101 course. And it is really straightforward in the community, along with all the other courses that are available, like our garden course or the garden planning intensive course that is still live. We went through it live, but you can still review it with all the replays. So if you're interested, you can go and check it out. But for any of you that are joining this for free today, there is more free monthly events, and there's one free course, which is an herb garden course, that is really, really great, I think, because everybody can get started with an herb garden, or you can just do it in addition to everything else. And I give you all the tools in which to do it. So it's pretty exciting. So, okay, I'm going to share my presentation with you guys, and so you can see all the different tools, because I think it's important. One caveat in this whole thing is that I am and will be sharing, hold on, I gotta move. We'll put it into present. I will be sharing Amazon links. The only reason I use Amazon links is because they are really easily accessible in terms of getting information. You do not have to buy those things from that location. In fact, I would much rather see you go and take that information and go to your local hardware store or nursery or something like that, because most of us have access to these things from our local stores, and I much prefer you guys do that. I only share those links specifically for the information reason, nothing else. And you can find something similar if you want to. So it's totally up to you. But today, this is what you actually need. I feel like there's a lot of different tools out there. There's a lot of different light setups. There's really expensive light setups. And I just want to say that you don't have to do all that. And you can also do this in stages. And I'm going to send out this as a list in the replay so that you can also, like I said, click the links and go see the information if you want to kind of see what other options are out there as well that are in that realm. Okay, so first of all, why should you seed start? It's not right for everybody, and I don't suggest it for everybody, but it's a really fun thing if you want to do it. I do it on a varying level, but most of the time what we're looking for when we're going to seed start is that we want more variety in our garden. Maybe there's plants that we want to grow that maybe, you can't access where you live, or, you just want to diversify your garden in some way. It's a really great option. You can jumpstart the season. So it can give you, for instance, a lot of us in the North, we couldn't grow tomatoes unless they were starts in some way, whether we seed start them or we purchase them from a farm. And then you get your hands in the soil earlier, which I think is really nice. That's the only reason I really seed start, other than the variety standpoint. It's just so nice to smell soil at the end of March, beginning of April, and then learn your plants more intimately. I think it's really nice to watch a plant go from seed to that first, little leaves, to the first true leaves, to kind of a true seedling, to then like an adolescent seedling, and then eventually watching it become an adult and enter the soil. It's a really fun experience to just watch some of your favorite plants in this capacity. But like I said, it's not necessary. And then in some cases, it can save money. But if you have a small garden or anything less than 6 raised beds, it's probably not going to save you money. I will just be honest with you. The startup can be a little bit on the high end. whether you mix your own soil mix or you're purchasing it. And in fact, it's worth just like pricing it all out and seeing where that break even is. And also you got to take in factor in your time and the amount of work it is. So it is still a task for sure. So, okay, what tools are necessary? Because the tools are how we actually do this. And I can go through every single one. So first of all, we need a seed starting mix. Now you have to do a mix. These are soilless mixes that do not have actual soil in them. I go into this pretty in depth in the course about why we don't want to utilize a soil mix or potting soil or anything like that for this, but basically it's to avoid fungal issues. And what we really want is to look for a soil mix that is peat free, because peat has a direct unsustainable impact on our environment. And so I really suggest looking for things that utilize other products that are more sustainable, such as cocoa coir or degraded. There's processes now where they do a process of degrading forest material or materials that were byproducts from building material, like wood harvesting, and then they degrade them. And similar processes composting, and it's much more sustainable than getting peat, which is not easily rebuilt, and it's a huge carbon draw and a carbon I'm blanking on the word, but you guys get it. So I shared some the other day about this on Instagram, and it's super important. So if you're going to buy a mix, this one I am trying this year. It is brand new, and it is a 3-in-1 seed starting mix by Back to the Roots, which is a B Corp certified company, and it's peat free. They're utilizing things that are, cast off byproduct things that are just off of other production of materials. So they're not going to waste, and they're utilizing it to build really great mixes that we can utilize as gardeners so we can be more sustainable. I have no affiliation with them. I just have been doing a lot of research, and this seems to be the most affordable and peat-free and easily accessible, because usually you can find it at Target and places like that as well in your local community. Next is you could make it. Now, the only way I would suggest making it, and I have a little recipe, so to speak, like by parts, but the only reason I would say make it is if you are doing a lot of it. So these things will add up really quickly when you go to the store to go buy them. And it is not inexpensive in any way to make your own. Sometimes the DIY idea can seem as if it would be cheaper, but I will tell you right now, it is not necessarily cheaper, but it can be really enjoyable and really fun. It can also be, so you just have to weigh those different things about what works for you. Okay, so that's essential. You have to have the seed starting mix. Next, you have to have some sort of shelving unit. And I really suggest using a shelving unit. They don't have to be complicated. They just need to be probably not made of wood unless you don't care about the wood getting wet. But you just really need a basic shelving unit to store all your seedlings, to have your lights, and you can have just 2 tiers, you can have 3, whatever works for you. It just needs to be something. I have something that I can like collapse and put away, because we do it in our mudroom, which receives like tons of light. And so that is the best space for us, but I don't want a shelving unit up all the time. So I have something that I can move in and out as needed. Next is a heat mat. Now, not every seed needs a heat mat. If you're doing spring seeds specifically and not doing summer seeds, or some of the fall seeds may not need them, depending on when you're just starting. This is why, like in our online community, we have this whole soil temperature chart and everything like that. And it really helps you understand how and when to utilize a heat mat. They just really help. And you can see on this one that it says like basil needs to sit on it for 5 to 7 days, or broccoli needs 7 days. Tomatoes need 6, peppers need 7 to 10. Peppers are the only one I actually leave on there, because my soil in my house never stays anything above like 60, 65 degrees without a heat mat. And so peppers need that heat longer, but I just watch them. If they start to become leggy, then I pull them off. But for the most part, I've never needed peppers to be removed from the heat mat. And in fact, when I have, they've slowed their rate of growth and they just become really unhappy. So it's not 100% true. You just got to pay attention to your soil. But you can kind of see that you don't use a heat mat other than for just germination. And what you do is you basically create a germination chamber, and you're just increasing that temperature for a short period of time. And then once those true leaves have appeared, you're all done with it. Move on. So, like I said, it is not a necessary thing. If you have a space heater, anything like that, and you're just doing a couple trays, that may be enough to just keep your soil at the right temperature. So it really just depends. A tub to store your seed mix in. So whether you are utilizing bagged seed mix or seedling mix, or you're making your own, you need to have a tub to store it in, which sounds funny, but this way you can get it all damp and wet, because if you don't, it can be hydrophobic, which means that when you go to water it, the water just sits on top, which then will create funguses. And so we want to pre-moisten it so that it's best being done in a tub. So if you have one at home, it's all you need. So, and it doesn't have to be clear. It can be any color. In fact, if it isn't clear, that's probably better, but I just snagged a quick picture. This is highly suggest this watering can. It is plastic. It is not expensive like most Haas watering cans, which can be upwards of $100 to $120. This one is plastic, and I also highly suggest it for kids. It's really great. It's smaller, and I can't remember exactly how many ounces it is off the top of my head, but the rain head also comes off, so you can remove it. So it's either rain head or spout, and you can redirect the rain head too, so it pours out, and it has the perfect amount of water that comes out. It does not flood your seedlings. It is really nice. Though I highly suggest watering from underneath in your trays, and I'll show those in just a minute. Okay, so posable lights. I think these are the best. Everyone has different ideas. I have a really expensive one that is great. It's white in terms of color, but these ones aren't that expensive. They're somewhere between $20 to $30, and you can really concentrate the light where you need it, and then you can remove it. There's a lot more control, surprisingly, with these cheaper lights that have posable arms. They clamp onto your shelving unit, and they're really flexible. Whereas, like, literally and figuratively, but it's much easier than the ones that you have to attach underneath your shelves. And then you have to have a lowering and up, and it can be a headache. I'm just going to be honest with you. So this way you can control your lighting to make sure your seedlings aren't like trying to raise to it. And they don't get really hot, like some of the white ones that you're going to put underneath shelves. They can get really warm. And so if your seedlings reach to them, because your lights are only supposed to ever be 2 inches above, no more, no less. And you're not paying attention, and one day like your tomato plant gets a little aggressive and it hits that light, it's going to get crispy and you're going to damage the leaves. So these ones are much cooler in temperature, which is also great because I have kids around. They do a really good job. Do the expensive ones work really well? Yes, they do. They definitely do, but I don't think they're necessary. You don't need to pay $50, $60, $70 per light in order to have a great LED light. So you can use these. I highly suggest them. Then these garden trays. So I really like starting seedlings and having these trays, because whether you're doing soil blocking, whether you're doing pots, whether you're just doing, like I show in the course, tray method, where you pack the seedling mix in there and then you make these lines and then you seed those things, and you can get like almost a whole garden in 1 or 2 trays. So it's pretty amazing. You have to up pot them, but you have one that's non-permeable, so there's no holes in it, and one with holes in it. And you stack them inside of each other and then water into the non-permeable one, and then you put it down and all the water comes up. Underwatering is always best to avoid any green fungus on top or dampening off potential. Hopefully your soil mix is sterile enough that you don't have those issues, but that's how it happens. And so I really like having this underwater situation. It also creates stronger root development, which is more natural to the environment that the plants will be in as they get older. So These trays come in packs and they're really inexpensive. Just make sure you get really good quality ones. It's really worth investing in. Or usually you can find them cast off from local nurseries. Just make sure you wash them because you have no idea what sort of soil they've been using, anything like that. So it's really important to wash and sterilize them if you get them somewhere else and they're not brand new. Okay, soil blockers are not necessary. Soil blocking in general is not necessary to grow seedlings. Is it lower in terms of environmental impact because of not using plastic? Possibly, yes. But if the plastic and it already exists when I go and buy something or anything like that. And so I just save all my pots and I just reuse them and make sure that everything is healthy and good. And then I have never done soil blocking. I worked at a farm where we did it, but I feel like it can be really tricky unless you have a really strong method and you're doing a lot of plants. It can be, you still have to up pot and you still have to give those seedlings deeper root system areas. I don't necessarily think that it's necessary. If you think it looks like fun and you want to try it, go for it. Make sure that the squares are at least 2 by 2 because the tiny ones are only for like super tiny plants. And though they're cute, we don't want that for most of the plants that we grow in our garden. It's typically for flower farmers that are growing smaller. The seeds are just like minuscule, like snapdragons. I'm trying to think of some other ones. I can't remember off the top of my head, but snapdragons for sure. And those are really great because they take a lot of time they can pack a ton of them in there and they take a lot they just don't need as much right away, but then they can up pot them into something larger. And typically they're still utilizing plastic down the road to up pot those plants into, unless they're going out right away. So if they have anywhere more than 4 weeks that they're going to be in that block, they're going to need to go into a larger pot in order to be sustained till they go out into the ground. So it's up to you. Also getting that moisture right so it all sticks together and doesn't like melt or whatever can be really tricky too. So now germination cover goes along with that heat mat. Now you don't have to necessarily use the heat mat. Just because you have to use a heat mat doesn't mean you have to use a germination cover. And just because you don't use a heat mat doesn't mean you don't have to use a germination cover. Sometimes we can just utilize a germination cover and it will do everything we need, especially if you have enough heat going on in your space. If you have a heat, like a space heater or anything like that, it will work just as well. But a germination cover is amazing because it really creates that germination tank that you need. For instance, at the farm that I was at, we would put these trays of plants that were seeded and then we put them into this big freezer that was the germination chamber, and they would be like stacked like on top of each other, not on shelves. And we put them in there and within 2 days they would be sprouting and like underneath each other. And so germination chambers and covers are specifically meant just to get the seed going. So think about it like that's the moment the baby's made, like is in germination. So you need it for that initial amount of time. And then once that plant is going, you don't need it. So there's a reason they're really cheap and they're really necessary. Can you create some different types of them? Yeah, probably. But in my experience, just one of these like cheap ones that you can get at a garden store are great. They usually come in 2 or 3, even 4 packs, and they don't run more than $1 or $2. And the impact they have and the difference you'll notice in germination is pretty amazing. They make a big difference. Okay, finally, our last thing is fertilizer. We are doing a massive whole month-long thing on fertilizing in June, but fertilizing is really important in the seed starting like when we're growing seeds, because that seed starting mix that we have, even though I suggest putting compost in there, compost only has micronutrients. It doesn't have a high concentration of macronutrients. So we need to make sure that we have enough macronutrients going back into those seeds, because once they germinate, the seed holds all the initial nutrients that plant needs, but then After that, once it has its true leaves, it needs to be fed. It has no access to macronutrients at that point. So in order to continue its life in a strong and healthy way, we have to feed it, and really feeding it at a half concentration level of what we would feed an adult plant. That this, for instance, this fertilizer would recommend is all you need to do. And I do it when I pot them into their pot that they'll thrive in pretty much until they go out. Other than tomatoes are the only ones that are different from that. And then I feed them 2 weeks before they go outside. So 2 times. And what this does is it just gives them that really strong amount of fertilizer right away to give them all those nutrients that they're looking for. The feeds I always do from over the top, because then you're getting it into the leaves, and which is really important. So it's like our skin, and all the nutrients go into their skin and into basically what we would consider like their blood system. And then they take them back in underneath whatever they didn't get up top, they'll then get underneath in the soil. So it's the only time I overwater my seedlings, because that's the best time to really feed them really well. So I want to make sure they get both situations. So this fertilizer I specifically like. It is not necessarily vegan friendly, because what we're utilizing to make this is fish that, like, the byproducts of fish processing. So it is not necessarily a vegan fertilizer. Yes, there are vegan fertilizers and there are non. And that's something we'll go into in the fertilizing class in June. And I'll talk high level in a free course, and you can see that. But our members are going to get like a full in-depth on this. But the seaweed obviously is vegan, but it's all organic. It's from natural existing products. There are no chemicals, no synthetic fertilizers, nothing. And that's why I love Neptune specifically. But if you want to utilize vegan fertilizer, I would suggest worm castings, which is just worm poop from worm farm. And the other one is mushroom compost that you can make into a tea. And those are really good fertilizers that you can use. Some people also use alfalfa pellets. That's another option. But alfalfa pellets are tricky because unless you can get certified organic ones, they're most likely sprayed. So because of how alfalfa is grown, so that can be kind of tricky. So this is my favorite one because of the levels. You can see the 231. 231 indicates the NPK, which is the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And those are the key macronutrients that every plant needs in order to produce flowers, healthy root system, nice green, rich leaves that can photosynthesize properly, all of those things that it's going to want and need over the course of its life. So this one's pretty even for plants across the board, especially seedlings, because the 3 is really the one that is really great, because we want to make sure that we're giving them it builds their immune system basically. And so this is going to make them really resilient plants. So that's why I like this one, is it has that higher 3. And the nitrogen is really key too at this stage, because they're not flowering yet and they're not fruiting. So that one isn't as important just yet, but we're preparing them still for that process. So it is very confusing to talk about fertilizers, though, if you don't understand it. It's taken me a long time to really understand how to know what my plants need. So I'm not over fertilizing, I'm not under fertilizing, and it's all about paying attention and understanding what the plant needs at certain times. And that's what I'll teach. But I hope this is helpful in terms of the amount of the things that are necessary and the things that aren't. And I also wanted to address some of the things that maybe we see out in the world and what we don't. And one other thing that I realized I did not put in here is that with the containers, there are lots of options for containers if you don't do soil blocking. I showed the trays, but I would always suggest, if you're going to seed start in cell trays first, and then pot them into like 3 or 4 inch pots, because that's usually the size that they'll be able to carry for a longer period of time. So, and most of them will be fine at that level. So I know it's just you and me, Caroline, but if you have any questions, you are welcome to ask. If not, yeah, we got 4 minutes before the end of the session, but I hope oh, how small could it be? I mean, you could have one of those non-permeable trays with 3 plants in it, if that's all you wanted. Like you could start, and I really don't suggest, if it's your first time seed starting, don't start anything more than like 5 to 6 different varieties of plants, because it can get really overwhelming because every single one of them has a different need. And so I never got into like any crazy flowers or anything like that, or like eucalyptus, even lavender is really hard. There's certain ones that I just never have really dug deep into because they're just so challenging and you have to really understand them. But for the most part, I would suggest like, 1 or 2 different varieties at first and see how they go. And you can utilize the list of like those beginner plants too. If it's your first time, those are also easy to seed start. So hopefully, yeah, you don't have to go big. And usually if you have a smaller setup, you really only need 1 light and 1 tray, one one heat mat if they need heat, or if you have a space heater, you should be fine for a small setup. Do you have any other questions before we hop off? Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, there's also the session, I think it's on Monday that we're doing, with some further Q&A time. So hopefully the course is also helpful too, but well, awesome. Thanks for Caroline showing up today and everyone else who signed up. I hope you enjoy the replay. There was like 30 of you, so which is really awesome. But I kind of figured most of you wouldn't be showing up, which is fine. That's why I record these. So, but Caroline, thanks for keeping me company. Okay, you guys have a wonderful Friday and have a great weekend. Okay, bye guys.